Hello, everyone. Welcome to another new episode of ESL Talk. After another greatly requested episode last week on teaching IELTS online, today's episode will cover the topic of learning efficiency.
Yes, it will. I love this choice of topic today because goal setting and being efficient as a learner or a teacher are key skills we can adapt in our approach to help us make the most of every teaching day.
And we have a wonderful guest today, Galina, joining us, and she's going to share her expertise, knowledge, and a lot of tips for you to be a more efficient teacher, become more efficient learners, or help your learners become more efficient, and also for all of us to be better goal setters.
Yes, very important trait that we need to try to practice and learn a little bit more as well. So it's such a great idea to discuss how to be more efficient, especially as so many of us have to work so hard to get things done as ESL teachers. We know that it can be very draining. So Faye, what are some steps that you take to be efficient, and how do you set solid goals as a teacher?
Yeah, I try to use, and I think like all of us, I guess, try to use all of your time for work. And I think that sometimes that can be difficult, especially when you're starting out, especially if you work at a school and you have like little breaks here and there, and you feel like you're always working. But it's just prepping is such a big part of teaching, right?
Yes.
So just finding time where you can be efficient with your prepping and maybe cutting it into chunks a bit so it's not overly exhausting, especially for marking and things like that.
Yeah.
I think that has always helped me, like using a little bit of time I have before class, after class, in the breaks to do like my photocopying and just organizing your day so that it makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes you a lot more efficient. Now, obviously, if you're teaching online, it's a bit different.
Yeah.
Like so many of us working from home, it's hard because it just feels like you're always working.
Even today, I've just had to try to grab like the odd minute here and there just to work on prep. And like mostly now for 90% of my students, I don't have to prep that much. I can just kind of, make a few edits and make a few changes and we're good to go. But there's still a few students who have very specific goals and I need to be able to reach those goals with them by preparing. So prep does take a lot of time, and I'm usually pretty efficient. I've used some tools to help me, like we talked about before. Things like Google Calendar is great with the direct links. Evernote is a lifesaver. It's been a game changer for me. And of course, making sure that I'm being kind of productive and I'm taking breaks in between the day, which helps me to do that.
Yeah, and one thing I find that like if you're just starting out, and I know a lot of our listeners are a bit like early on in their career of teaching, try to keep a record of everything you're doing in every class you have, and that can be done electronically nowadays, because chances are you are going to need to teach a similar class again or a similar type of student again.
Right.
So just finding what works for you in terms of organization, but making sure you have that will help you so much, because it will feel like you're prepping and working all the time at the beginning. But trust us, it does get easier and you do become more efficient over time.
Yes. Right? Give it enough time for you to build and prepare your programs, your materials, your courses, so that you have a bank of resources that you can draw from, and it'll make it much, much easier as you go ahead. So yeah, for sure. So Faye, should we encourage our students to do the same? Should we get them to be efficient and set goals? And how would we go about doing that on a student level?
I think it can be quite similar in terms of when you're an English learner, especially as an adult, sometimes students find it hard, let's say, to find time to learn, to sit and learn. But a similar approach that I mentioned to teaching or prepping can be taken as a learner. Let's say you have 15 minutes before you go into work, or you have a 15-minute break at work. You can have your lunch or whatever, or your snack, and listen to a podcast in English, or if you're commuting, you can use that time to read a book or watch a video, or these are all learning opportunities just to incorporate learning. And obviously it'll depend on your goal. So as you mentioned, setting goals, right? Oh, I want to improve. I had a student ask me just this weekend, oh, teacher, I want to read a book in English. What do I do? And she had a specific book in mind. I'm like, well, start small. Don't expect too much. Don't expect to be able to do the exact same thing you would in your own language. And just set yourself a goal, like a weekly goal. I'm going to read 10 pages or a page a day. but don't go too crazy with that goal. Otherwise it won't be sustainable. And I think that's important for us to model for our
Yes, you've
students
triggered
too.
that keyword, sustainable. We need to make sure that we don't burn out. We don't put too much on our plates, because it's very easy to become a workaholic and you lose focus and you lose sight of what you're actually supposed to be doing. So it can be quite tricky for sure.
Yeah, same for students, right? They end up doing so much and then feels like they're not doing anything. So focused learning, I think, is important. What is your goal? And then we can help them sort of, okay, so if your goal is improve your comprehension or whatever, let's choose a YouTube channel you like. Let's choose a TV show you like or something, and do this much every day.
Exactly.
And I think that that's a way that we can help them build these sustainable goals, right?
Right, absolutely.
Now we talked a little bit about prepping, planning. Why do you think we need to be efficient when we're planning? How can we be efficient?
Yeah, I think what I've found after almost 4 years of kind of doing this in a part-time and a full-time basis is to be really clear on what you need to achieve that day. So I generally have a list now. I keep like a sticky note. Well, not even a sticky note. I have it on Evernote now, where I just have a to-do list, pretty simple, but I'll separate it into 3 sections. So my now, my soon, and my later list. So I'll try to have it, okay, what can I do today that needs to be done today, like immediately or very soon? So I'll try to put no more than 3 things on that list. The later list, again, no more than 2 or 3 things. So the soon list, no more than 2 or 3 things, and the later list, no more. So 3, 6, no more than 10 things. It sounds like it's very overwhelming, but if we break down those 9 or 10 things into 3s, then we can start chipping away at them. And then what I try to do, it sounds a little bit like cheating. It's not cheating, but I always try to do the easiest thing first, because then I have a small win to motivate me and to get me moving. So it might be write a script for this podcast, or prepare my lesson for student X, or respond to this email and send the lesson notes from yesterday, whatever it is. Little easy wins like that can get you moving, and make the bigger tasks a little bit easier. Like right now, these last couple of weeks have been very, very hectic for me. And it's really important that my calendar is so well organized. So another real tip to help you be efficient in your planning is plan your time well. Even down to the 15 minutes. So if I have a 15-minute break, I'm like, great, I can grab breakfast then, or 30 minutes, great, I can take the dog for a walk, I can get on an exercise, or lunch this time, or spending time with family this time. So try to schedule yourself as best you can, so that you're not neglecting your own health, you're not neglecting your own needs, your family's needs. And don't be taking on more than you're capable of. So my rule of thumb is no more than 4 lessons a day, or 4 hours a day. Maybe you have shorter lessons, but no more than 4 hours
of active teaching,
or maybe 5 lessons a day, spread out. I think that's really key. Now, because I've been able to build my materials, my courses, my programs, and have them kind of not ready to go, but can get them ready pretty quickly now. Prep is a little bit easier. So that means I can actually maybe take on 6 or 7 classes a day, but I would not advise it. And one more thing in your planning, try to vary it. Try to have some variety in what you do. Don't be doing the same things, and don't be blocking them all into one day. If I have to do lesson prep, it might be tempting to say, I'll just do it all on Sunday night. No. I'll work. It's never going to get done completely finished. So work on it an hour a day. That's a much better way.
Same with marking, I find.
Yeah, marking the same as well. So I think those are some practical steps that you can take, and try to utilize tools. Like I said, I use a combination of Google Calendar and Evernote now, because Evernote for my students, I have all the material, all the content, the recordings, the files, it's all in one place. I don't have to email, I don't have to chase students. I just share the link with them. Likewise, my Google Calendar, I put the time, the date, the link for the Zoom meeting, and that's just the other person can see that as well. So that helps you make sure you're organized, the other person knows what's going on, and that they have all the information as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, good tips. Yeah, very practical. Now, what about goals? How do you set goals for your students and for your lessons, and make sure that both of you are achieving them?
So this is something we've talked about quite a lot before, but I'll just recap because it is quite important. The first time you meet your students, set goals with them and listen to them, ask them questions, and get them to share what are the issues or the difficulties that they're having. And then as a teacher, position yourself with how you can solve those problems.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be realistic. If a student says, I want to go from 6 to 8 in IELTS, well, that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Not without a lot of work and effort over a long period of time. So, usually I work with students for 10 or 12 weeks initially.
Mm-hmm.
So we will say your goals are 1, 2, 3. So we set 3 goals. We set an easier goal, a challenging goal, and a very difficult goal. That way we can make progress with that student, hopefully in all of those ways, but at least with 2 of those, and definitely with 1. So they can always see progress because you're meeting that easier goal first, and they can see quick gains, which is what they want and which is what you want to help them do. The medium term goal, the kind of the second one, that's going to be challenging, but you should be able to get there by maybe week 5 or week 6 of meeting with them. And that long term goal is the ultimate aim. So it might be something like boost IELTS speaking from 6 to 6.5 in 6 weeks. Okay, that's doable.
Yeah.
And then go from a 6.5 to 7 in 12 weeks. Okay, that's realistic. What's the easy goal? Understand the strategies and ways to answer IELTS speaking questions.
Awesome.
Okay, we can do that in a few lessons. So
do you often go back to those goals? Like how often do you go back to show them?
So what I do is I create a kind of a file for that student, and those are at the top. They are in the header, so the student constantly sees them all the time. And what we can do is we can revisit them every couple of lessons and say, look, this is the goal we set. Do you think that's still realistic? So maybe the more difficult ones, if we have to, maybe we need another few weeks, maybe we need to tweak it slightly. So we can do that, have that flexibility as well. But for me as a teacher, again, I try to make sure that when I'm setting goals, that it's something I know I can do, and it's something that I know is reasonable, but it might take more time. So don't try to do everything today. It's very tempting, but it's just going to burn you out. I've learned, like, for example, I spent the last few weeks putting my courses together, and I've only done 2 of them out of 5, but I feel good now because I know, well, there's those other 3, I can do them, but when I have time, because it's a very time consuming process and I want to do it properly. You want to do it well and you want to do it right the first time. So make sure you give yourself the time to do that. And then to help me be accountable and be productive as well, I have the no weekend rule. That's something I set myself. No weekends, no Saturdays, no Sundays. And it's tempting, but don't do it. The only caveat I give myself is I give myself at 1 hour maximum on a Sunday, just to make sure everything's lined up for the next morning.
Like prepping for the week, basically.
That's it. So that would be my advice in terms of setting goals for you as a teacher and also for your students. So what about for you, Faye, for our teachers, for our listeners, what advice would you give them when it comes to setting goals and sticking to them? That's the key part.
Yeah. So I don't think there is any magic formula.
There isn't.
Right?
Guys, you can switch off now.
A lot of people think there is, but if you do this, you'll achieve all your goals. I think, and I've watched several videos on this before, and I find that the people that are most successful with their goals, one thing that they have in common is the kind of goal they set themselves.
That's a great point.
You have to be realistic with what you achieve and how soon you can achieve. So basically the model you have with your students of having the 3 goals and make them more challenging over time is kind of what you want basically as a teacher as well. So my goal for this semester or this term or whatever you're working with is to become more confident in my own teaching of the past tenses. Be specific and be realistic with what you can achieve in a session. And then next session, okay, now I feel good about this. I think I can try something harder. Okay, next session, I want to feel more confident answering my student questions impromptu or something like that. Or I want to talk less in class and let my students speak more. So all of these action points, and especially I know it can be overwhelming. Sometimes I hear it from our listeners or people that have been on the show that listen to us and they say, oh, I listen to all these episodes and it's so much good advice and I want to do it all, right?
You can't. It's not possible.
You can't. No, none of us can. So pick a couple of things you want to work on for yourself and set a realistic timeline for it. And just make it sustainable, make it realistic. And I think that that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I would agree. And the beautiful thing about, being an entrepreneur, having your own business, or even doing this as a side hustle, as a side project, is there's so many things you can learn, and you have all the time you need. So when you are ready, when you do have time to dedicate and say, right, I'm going to get my website done, or I'm going to get my course done, or I'm going to build my materials, then you can do that in a realistic way. So I think that's really important. Thanks for that advice, Faye.
Now, finally, what are some goals you think all new teachers should have? So teachers that are just starting out, what should be a one or a few goals that they should have, and how can they achieve them?
Honestly, I'll sound like a broken record saying this. Who are you as a teacher? What is your identity? Now, you might say, well, I'm Daniel, I'm an English teacher, or I'm Faye and I'm an English teacher. Well, fine, there's millions of people who have the same thing to say. So how are you? What makes you you? What are your skills? What are your qualities? What are your characteristics? Why are students going to enjoy learning with you? Why are they going to enjoy being one of your students? So the first goal I would set is figure out who you are, figure out what it is you do well. Doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the best at anything, but figure out what you do well, and then translate that into your message to students. What do students need to know? So instead of saying, I'm Daniel and I teach English, I might say, my name is Daniel Shaw and I'm an academic writing specialist, and I spend my time helping students to improve their academic writing so that they can be successful in university. Okay, who am I? So that student resonates. Okay, so he does this, and this is me, and this is how we connect, and this is how we can learn together. Again, for you, Faye, you might say, I specialize in communication. I specialize in speaking skills and helping students to build their confidence and grammar when it comes to communicating in English. Okay, that's better than I teach speaking. So again, find your identity. That's really important. That's the first thing I would definitely say. Secondly, when it comes to you trying to find students, or even maybe you're working with students already, try to have an approach and a system. So again, we can't be perfect. We are not robots. I actually posted about this today. Really important to have a system. So what do I do to make my life easier, to make my students' life easier? So now it's taken me 4 years and I'm still working on it. I have a system now. Everything's in one place for the student. Everything's in one place for me. And I have all my materials ready to go, so I can just kind of put those blocks in place very quickly. And, the efficiency has really improved. I don't think I'd be able to do it how I was before, because I just couldn't handle the amount of students that I have. And with goals, think about if you have a fiscal goal, a financial goal, or you have a number of students that you want to work with, or you have some longer term goals of maybe creating groups or courses. How are you going to get there? Well, write it down first, and then if you don't write it down, it'll never get started, and then you can work towards those things slowly. If that's extra training, extra counseling, extra support from others, if that's doing some research yourself, or taking those steps, you can break it down into smaller steps. So who are you? What's your system for learning and teaching your students? And how are you going to reach those bigger long-term goals that you've set yourself? Those would be my steps. Is there anything else that jumps out from that?
I think that's good advice, even for teachers who might be starting out at a school.
Yes.
Who are you in that school? How are you going to set yourself apart?
Exactly.
Because it's just going to make you more confident as a teacher. And it makes your work more enjoyable when you're like true and genuine.
And we've talked so much about this imposter syndrome of, I don't think I'm good enough. I can't charge this much, or my students won't like this. Well, the best barometer, the best feedback is your student. So ask them, get their feedback, be honest with them. They will be honest with you, and that will really help you to dictate a little bit more about your identity. And it's really hard and it does take time, but again, the more effort, the more organized and efficient you are, the better you'll be able to define this and hopefully move forward in your teaching journey.
Very true. Well, that was a productive start to our proceedings today, but let's hear more from our expert Galina, who's able to manage multiple projects while running her own teaching business.
Galina, thanks for taking the time to join us today on ESL Talk. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and we are excited to hear how you set goals and learn efficiently while helping others to do the same.
So, Galina, could you share a little bit about your background, your journey, and how you got to where you are today?
So as a summary, I was born in the UK. I started teaching English early 2014, and I started off teaching in London. And then I moved to Italy about 6 years ago. In terms of how I got to where I am today, mostly feeling very dejected, we could say, about what we as language teachers are forced to offer in language schools in terms of time constraints, demanding syllabuses. In terms of how I got to where I am today with my teaching style, that comes down from my own language learning history, which was very uninspiring, demotivating. I basically thought I was no good at learning languages. I cried when I did my CELTA because I didn't know what an adjective was. So I thought it meant, I'm going to be a terrible teacher. Right. I can't do this. And it's basically left me determined to give my students the classes that I wish I'd had as a language learner back in secondary school, to avoid them having that same lack of confidence and make sure that they've got that desire to learn that I didn't have as a teenager.
Great motivation.
Yeah, that's the best kind of motivation. And so what is your approach to goal setting, and what's the process you follow to set these realistic and effective goals?
It's a new one. I think with having an approach to goal setting, we kind of need to play around a bit, both as teachers with giving our students advice on goal setting, but also from a learner perspective on what works for us. I've recently become a big fan of Kate from English Anywhere and her 3-1-3 goal setting, which basically involves looking back, first of all, at the past and where we started, and then looking towards the future. So where do we want to be in 3 months, 1 year, and 3 years? And it kind of got me feeling really excited for the first time ever about setting goals and kind of visualizing myself in the future.
Right. That's
amazing.
great. Yeah, they have a lot of great tips. I mean, we've had them on here a few times before.
Yeah, we have. I've learned a lot from them.
Yeah, great.
They're really good. Yeah. And it also involves, from a more personal perspective, I think it's better to start small with setting goals and build up. So it's better to be realistic. I'd rather my students, I'm going to start with 5 minutes a day, and then I'm going to increase it where and when I can. There's, when I Googled out of curiosity earlier, how long does it take to set a habit and to set a routine of language, or just learning or a new habit? There's so many different answers to that, and it's incredible. It's incredible that people sell this online as well. There's the like famous
formula.
exactly, and there is no formula, right? Because it's the human brain. There's too many unknown variables. This could be the reward value, pre-existing behaviors and habits. It also comes down to what it is we're trying to build as a habit. Is it complex or is it simple as a behavior? Because obviously these simple behaviors are easier to habituate. And any lasting behavioral change is going to take a lot of work, which, when we work, and we're also adult learners, we're too tired from work. We don't want to put in the work of learning a language. We'd rather spend time socializing with our friends, with our family, shopping, social media, etc.
Really, really important.
Yeah.
Really important. It's about, I guess, it kind of a bit of a work-life balance as well, and about
Yeah,
being realistic and being honest. I think a lot of people aren't honest, right? I think
honest.
they think
Yeah.
we can do all these
Yeah.
things, but in reality, can you? I think not. It's quite
No, but
interesting.
also something I hear time and time again is I don't have time for this. I don't have time to study every day. What I hear is I don't want to make time
Yeah.
because
It's not a priority.
exactly. And we all have 5 minutes in our day. We all do.
Yeah.
My most successful period of language learning was actually when I worked for a school. I used to study while I was commuting, often standing up on a crowded metro train, and also using an application called Drops in the bathroom while brushing my teeth, along with Quizlet for verb patterns or grammar structures, whatever it was I wanted to review. And the reason for that was I looked at my routine and I thought, where can I fit this in?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's ultimately no one, as harsh as this reality is, no one is going to do this for us. If we want something, we have to take responsibility for getting there.
Absolutely.
This leads me back to the myth of how many days it can take to build a habit. So the 21-day myth can be great because while it is a myth, it can serve as a psychological placebo to motivate us.
You can see the finish line kind of thing, right?
Exactly. And, if you've done it for 21 days, chances are on 22 days, on the 22nd day, we're just going to do it again because it's like, well, I've done it for 21 days.
It sounds better than the one I heard before that was 30 days. So
yeah, well, I mean, there's so many of them. Something I once read was we have to do something 76 times before it becomes a habit. And I thought, right, and if we're doing that once a week, that's
it takes a
that's a lot of years. A lot of years.
I worked out close to 18 months.
Yeah, something like that, probably a year and a half. Yeah.
Wow, no, I had no idea. So Galina, how can we help our students to set the right goals and ensure that they reach them in our classes and courses? So if we have our own students, how are we setting goals for them and making sure they reach them?
I mean, that's a great question. We can, where possible, where we don't have these time constraints, we can be covering goal setting exercises on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. And in my opinion, this should be as autonomous as possible without any input from teachers. If you're a big fan of Scrivener, you're probably aware that he's previously stated, don't praise students, because by praising them, we take away their ability to reflect on and evaluate their own achievements, which it's not really what we're taught at CELTA. I don't know about you guys, but I was told praise.
Always,
and it just sounds so simple when you look back and you think, well, yeah, I shouldn't be doing that because they need to know what mistakes they're making and how to improve. So, the difference between feedback and praise is like, great work. Yeah.
Kind of empty as well.
It can be empty. Yeah. Because it becomes almost robotic and automatic from us. While feedback, as long as it's constructive and supportive to the student, it can be good or bad.
Yeah.
It serves a purpose. It's been suggested as well that motivation is, it's been described as a state of cognitive arousal, which I really liked. It just sounds so much more interesting than motivation. And it provokes a decision to act, which then results in the achievement of some previously set goal. So teaching students self-study skills and to take responsibility for their own learning, it kind of ignites a curiosity, which will then get them more excited about learning and more motivated, and hopefully help them to remember why they started learning in the first place.
Yeah. And that, I mean, I like that idea too, when it comes to independent learning, right? Because then they can go on setting goals, changing goals, and sticking with them.
Absolutely.
Now, what is, can you give us some examples, or let us know how that looks in practice in the classroom when you're supporting them and when you're helping them develop this independence or effective learning? What are the things you do in the class?
So it can be, when it comes to supporting study skills, it can be something as simple as, rather than asking me how to pronounce a word, reminding them that they can just go to Cambridge. They don't have to wait until the next lesson to say, how do I pronounce this word? Kind of thing. I encourage students to keep a journal as well, especially when they're exam students and they've done a practice paper, because chances are when it comes to the next lesson, they won't remember what issues they had with their homework or with their practice test.
Yeah.
I like to often talk about, what were your top 3 wins? What did you achieve this month? What can you feel proud of as well? As well as the challenges that they faced and why. In terms of in the classroom and effective learning, I would say more questions from students than teachers, and an environment where questions are valued and nurtured more than providing answers, because it shows that they're thinking and they're motivated and they're excited. And also students working together collaboratively to ask and answer questions and even debate them, with the teacher there to facilitate learning and offer support and guidance.
Yep. I think that's great. We talk about it a lot, about the teacher as a facilitator, and your role is to teach sometimes, but if you need to reach a goal, you need to try to get there on your own. And as a teacher, we're there to help them and give them the steps or the foundations, but they ultimately need to be the ones that do that themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've become, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I've become a really big fan over the years of guided learning.
Yes.
So rather than standing there and saying,
lecturing,
exactly, A plus B equals Z.
Right.
And maybe creating, and it's not something that's new. It's something that's been covered in various different course books, from as far back as I can remember. Creating a worksheet that gets them looking at it in context and asking questions about it, answering questions, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it is a thing that becomes a habit. Like we were just talking about creating a new habit as a teacher. Once you start planning your lessons that way, you kind of end up doing it subconsciously. Like you don't really realize that what you're doing is basically just guiding them to learn. And you're rarely answering questions. I find that, especially with exam prep and more advanced students, I find that they ask me the questions and I usually ask it back to the class, and you rarely have to answer anything. You just kind of check and make sure that, they're on the right path. So that's a great way to make them independent in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually today, when I was reading the question to myself in the park with my friend, and I said, oh my gosh, that's a great question, like effective learning. And she said to me, what do you mean by effective learning? And without even realizing, I was like, well, effective learning, in my opinion, it's this and it's this. And then I was just like, why aren't you a teacher, woman?
Right.
Exactly. So on that note, then, what are the challenges that students and teachers face when it comes to setting goals and learning effectively? We talked a little bit earlier about motivation, but are there any other points that come up?
I think students don't know how to set goals, personally. Children are never taught to. I went from secondary school to university, where I'd left this environment of almost passively learning and being spoon-fed information to suddenly having to research and write essays and not having a clue what to do.
Right.
And not knowing how to do something as simple as set a goal. Adults have likely forgotten how to even be in a learning environment. And despite this popular belief that they're more highly motivated, they still tend to be more passive learners. And they often need constant reminding of their motivations as well. I would say the biggest problem for teachers, obviously we can't take sole responsibility for the motivation of the student, and the best, the most engaging teachers can't succeed if the learners are not willing to meet them halfway and take a more active part in learning.
True.
Then, as previously mentioned, working for schools, juggling these challenging syllabuses and constant progress testing doesn't leave much time for learner skills and developing this kind of autonomous learning environment with goal setting. I would say as a kind of compromise, maybe making materials more challenging, maybe setting this reflection for homework, journaling, this kind of thing could be a nice way to incorporate it for a teacher employed in a school, perhaps.
Yeah, I love the idea of learning journals and reflections. I mean, regardless of my student, what level they're at, their background, I'll always get them to reflect on their own learning. And I use that as quite an important part, because I want to see as a teacher, okay, well, these are the goals we set. Are you actually meeting them? And you can sequentially stop step by step and see how well they're working towards it, if we need to refocus it. And it just helps keep students focused and motivated, which I think is really crucial for effective learning as well.
Absolutely.
Great. So Galina, how can our listeners find out more about you and learn more about your services and your business?
So I would say the easiest way is Instagram at confident_with English.
Okay, wonderful. That's great. And Instagram is the best way to reach out. So what we'll do is we will attach a link to the episode so you guys can find that, and you can feel free to follow and send a message to Galina. I'm sure she'll be happy to speak about this more if needed. Thank you for joining us today, Galina.
Thank you guys for having me.
All right, Galina, thanks for taking time out to share your incredible insights with us today. I'm sure our audience can learn so much from it.
Yes. And as always, please get in touch with us on Instagram at ESL Talk Podcast. Send an email to esltalkpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can also visit our website to access all of our previous episodes from every season for free. And join us on Patreon for even more benefits like teacher webinars, merchandise, and much, much more. Just go to esl-talk.com or our Instagram to find out more.
And of course, you can also follow us individually on Instagram.
You can find me at Learning with Faye. Faye is F-E-Y.
Or at I'm Daniel Teacher. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next week for another new episode.